In this video, I'm going to demonstrate a stretch for the wrist flexors as a group and the wrist extensors. This is a really nice stretch that can be included at the end of a massage sequence on the upper limb. And this would be really useful if you had a client that might be suffering from carpal tunnel syndrome or might be suffering from medial or lateral epicondylitis. In the conditions at the elbow, the tendinitis conditions at the elbow, we would still treat both sides of the forearm. So we treat the wrist flexor group along with the wrist extensor group. But sometimes when the pain comes to the elbow area, we might find that the client may have restricted range of motion at the wrist joint. So this is where this stretch comes in. It's a nice passive stretch that can be completed at the end of the massage of the upper limb before we then move on to the other arm. Okay, so to show you, one of the key things we need to do is make sure that we're not putting too much pressure into the wrist joint. Okay, so if we want to stretch the muscles at the top of the forearm, this is the wrist extensors. Then from here, we need to pop the wrist into this position. If we want to stretch the muscles on the inside of the forearm, the wrist flexors, then we need to stretch the wrist joint in this position. So we're taking the wrist into an extended position to stretch the wrist flexors, and then we're taking the wrist into a flexed position to stretch the wrist extensors. Okay, because remember we're taking the muscle into a stretch position rather than a contracted position. So we want to make sure that we're getting nice firm pressure across the joint without aggravating this small joint itself, but also maintaining comfort for the client. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to thread my thumb into the client's thumb here, and I'm just going to rest my fingers here. I'm supporting, in this instance, because the client Lydia is in a lying position, I'm bending the elbow slightly, but you might be able to achieve this if you're in a seated position and keep the arm completely straight. Okay, so I'm gently supporting underneath Lydia's arm here. I'm resting my fingers, I'm not gripping. If I'm gripping here, it's going to be uncomfortable into the wrist here, and also it might be uncomfortable with my thumb coming into that space on Lydia's hand. And then I'm applying pressure through this part of my hand here. So threading in and applying pressure. Now that I'm into that stretch position, I can just gently touch the muscle that I'm aiming to stretch, and I can feel that is in a stretch position. Okay, we're going to hold that roughly for about 15 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds, and that will just enable the muscle itself and the myotatic stretch reflexes to relax. Okay, asking for feedback from the client, making sure it's comfortable. We want the client to feel the stretch, but we don't want that stretch to be too much so that the client is holding their breath. Okay, so that's a stretch for our wrist flexors. So just reiterating, threading my thumb into their hand, loose with the fingers, loose with the thumb here, and applying the pressure into the stretch with the heel of your hand. Then turning the hand round so that we can now stretch the wrist extensors. So again, I'm gently supporting with my hand under here, taking my top hand, so I'm avoiding the wrist joint itself here, and my pressure is again going to come through the heel of my hand, but I'm pressing onto the palm. And again, from here, holding down, we can palpate through the thumb there to make sure that the muscle is in that stretched position and is being stressed, and we would gain feedback from the client. Okay, so just to reiterate those hand positions, thread the thumb through, nice light grip with those fingers there, so they're just literally holding. Okay, and then from here, applying the pressure through the heel of the hand, but making sure you're not pushing into the joint. Okay, so that's a nice stretch that you could add at the end of your massage treatment to the upper limb, whether it was focused on the whole of the upper limb or whether it was focused into that forearm area for conditions such as golfer's or tennis elbow or carpal tunnel, or any condition where there's restricted range of motion at that wrist joint.